Hello there, YouTubers. How do we do? Welcome to a react for the former developer of Warcraft 3. He's a level designer. He's going to answer questions that were asked. Abelhawk has put this video up, so go check out his video. I'll put the links in the description. I suggest you go check it out there originally. If you want to see my reaction, then continue to watch this video. But yes, this is on Abelhawk's channel. There's a part 1 and a part 2 to ask Dave anything. As for Dave, he's a developer who worked on Warcraft 3. One of his most noticeable levels is the Cullen of Stratham level, where Arthas has to defeat Mal'Ganis and beat him to the punch, killing all of the helpless villagers. And he put in the zoo, that's at the left-hand side. He's done other levels as well. So he worked on Warcraft 3, way back in the day. I think he even came back to help them out with Reforged a little bit, but was probably a little bit disgusted with just how much of a mess that situation was. But he has his own channel. I've seen some of his videos. He watches through he plays through certain games and talks about his experiences either working on them or his thoughts and opinions as to, the development side of creating those games. But if you want to see sort of a very chilled, laid-back approach to sort of analyzing, the intricacies of creation when it comes to game development, then yeah, he has a channel for that. So I'll link that as well, so you can go help and watch some of that. But we're going to watch through this first. So that's the introduction done. I'll try to react, not too much, because what I might do is watch both parts together, or I can separate them depending on how long I take to react, because it's going to be 40 minutes straight up if I just watch it without reacting. So let's get started. Let's try to get the volume good. Yeah. Let me know if this is about a good level. So he's one of the original designers of Warcraft 3 nearly 20 years ago. What's that bit? Hasn't worked for Blizzard since 2008, but he offered to answer your questions about his experience working there, making Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos and the Frozen Throne. Play it at 1.25 speed. That's not a bad idea, actually. So we got it on 1080.
Welcome, I am DesignerDave, and this is the Warcraft 3 Ask Me Anything that you never got. And that's primarily because Ask Me Anythings weren't really a thing back when Warcraft 3 released. In July of 2022, it'll have been 20 years since Warcraft 3 released. And I think that due to recent events, a lot of people are feeling betrayed, unhappy, disappointed with what's been going on with Warcraft 3, and especially Reforged. I can't do anything about any of that. So what I can do is sort of help you work through your nostalgia for the game and bring back those memories and maybe give you some resolution in anticipation of another game that might come out in the future that might be better.
Has he been working on Frost Giant in the background then? Or I guess this may be just his opinions. I wonder if he's been doing something there.
Consider it. In preparation for that, we took your questions, and I must say,
what's Frost Giant? So basically, Frost Giant is a studio that aims to create an RTS game in the near future, and they have some pretty solid developers. So it's actually definitely one to watch, because if you like Warcraft 3 or StarCraft, the gameplay of an RTS that's created by Frost Giant is probably going to be somewhere similar to that style. I'd assume. I don't know. I have no idea what it is they're working on exactly. I just know it's an RTS. And hopefully, if it's got those type of developers, then they'll try to, keep the mechanics similar to how well Warcraft 3 and StarCraft play. Because, game developers have created RTS in the past, and, it just doesn't feel as good as Warcraft 3 or as StarCraft. So hopefully they sort of they keep that feel of it. But anyway, keep an eye on them.
it was a lot of freaking questions. I didn't expect.
So these are the questions. So there's lore questions, working for Blizzard, opinions, unit models, design, campaign. So Abelhawk put out a AMA sort of request for the community, I think in a Reddit post, asking them to ask essentially questions for Dave, which he will then answer.
This sort of output from you guys, but wow, thanks. I'm impressed.
Oh,
with,
Jesus.
the sheer number of questions that we got. My goal, though, is that all of these questions will be answered in a satisfactory way and in a thorough way, such that...
In case you wonder, I didn't ask any questions. I was thinking about trying to come up with some questions, but honestly, I wasn't even sure what to ask, really. And I'm sure everyone else will come up with it.
No one's going to be like, well, you didn't really answer my question. I'm really going to answer all these questions as much as I can to the best of my ability. And I can't promise anything in particular, but I am looking at inviting some special guests to help me answer these questions so that it's not entirely upon me. Let's talk about me for a little bit. As you may or may not know, I was one of the campaign designers for Warcraft 3, Reign of Chaos, and the Frozen Throne. I did the Culling of Strathholm and several others, but people only really remember the...
I already told them that.
And I was responsible for a large number of the in-game cinematics and for many of some of the most appreciated Easter eggs, which is something that I, in particular, am fond of, putting Easter eggs into games. But I was only one person of, I believe, a 9-person campaign design team. So
9 people.
I can't take credit for everything, and I can't answer every question because I don't know what other people necessarily were thinking, but I will try to the best of my ability. And in lieu of not being able to answer a question, I will try to turn it over to other individuals.
See, that makes me wonder how many people they had working on Reforged, because you think that's back then, like 20 years ago, 9 people for that campaign team. It's pretty good. Obviously, there's a lot of campaign levels, so if you've ever played the Warcraft 3 campaign, whoo boy, it takes a long time to get through that one. You're going to need like 30 hours, basically, to get through the entire campaign, and that's if you kind of have experience and know how to play it. So, yeah, you can imagine it's just like one person working on like the Reforged campaigns, desperately trying to make those levels with those 2 to 3 years they had developing it.
We'll see what happens. But I think a large part of whether or not other people are going to be interested in participating in this AMA is the popularity of this one. So please like and subscribe, and please share this around with your friends. And maybe it will garner enough attention that the other people will be very easy to get involved. But we'll have to see.
So yeah, like I say, if you're watching this video, go over to the video that I'll link in the video description or in like the top comment if I remember to pin it. And I'll link it to this. So come over to here and thumbs this up to show some support, as well as, you know, DesignerDave's actual channel over here. So you can do it there. This is where I think, yeah, the part 2 is on his channel, I see. So the part 1 was on Abelhawk's channel. So yeah, come over here and thumbs it up there.
Oh, no better way than to start with question number 1. How much freedom did you have when designing campaign levels? Were you told how to set up the level, or did you just get some story outline and you could do whatever you wanted with it? Well, interestingly, we had quite a bit of freedom. When it came to the campaign levels, we were basically given a script.
Look at that. That's the credits. That's so cool.
Written by...
That was the inspiration, by the way. If you remember, if you've been with me for long enough, some of you may be patrons and remember, and you may have even had your name out there, but there was a time where I did do videos where I would like thank the patrons with like a cinematic kind of credit roll similar to Warcraft 3, and the creatures would come by and it would have their name.
Chris Metzen, and we would all sit around a round table, and read it together. And then when someone sort of felt like, oh, this is a level that speaks to me, they would grab it. That's what happened with me in the Culling of Strathholm. As soon as I saw Arthas was going to be slaughtering villagers, I'm like, oh yeah, that's so me. I'm taking this one. I believe I called dibs. And then once you are the campaign owner of that mission, you have free reign to do basically whatever you want. There are only a few things that have to be considered, which is that it has to follow the dialogue script. So those have to be in the mission somewhere, and it has to make sense, obviously. And what you're doing in general has to make sense. So when it came to the Culling of Strathholm, the script was like, yeah, Arthas is going to call the city. Well, sure, that's exactly what I did.
So, okay, so I think Chris Metzen was fairly loose, which was kind of cool in a way. Like, he'll give them the plan, so to speak, what he wants out of it, but otherwise it's kind of like, have fun. So, for example, like if someone gave me a request to do a 4 versus 4 RT, there's those that sometimes do a request where it'll be like along the lines of get Farseer, Tauren Chieftain, Blade Master, get 5 Grunts, 2 Raiders, 3 Shaman, get Bloodlust as fast as you can. Make sure once you've researched Bloodlust, you get Spirit. Like, you can give me the idea of what you're aiming for, and then there'll be others who just say, like, go an Orc army with Bloodlust, and the rest is up to you. That kind of thing. So I think that was probably more like Chris Metzen's kind of style, which is obviously more appreciated from a developer or, you know, like streamer point of view, that kind of thing, where it's just like, Just give me the base points of what I'm aiming for, and then I'll use my creativity to do the rest.
I made a map where you call the city against an opponent who was also turning them into zombies. And once that's decided, you opened up a new map. You pick the correct tile set and
He's
your
got
base
red.
layer, whatever that might be. Some people like to work with the grass initially.
How's he got red on the create new
Picked
map?
your height and width. It was all up to you. Everything was completely under your control. And then you just started laying out your terrain and texturing and putting down paths and choosing your locations and then editing the triggers. It was entirely up to the level designer. It was a lot of fun. It was also a lot of hard work, so I don't want to gloss over that component of it. We had free reign to do pretty much.
That does seem cool, man.
Were there ever any plans for expansions post Frozen Throne? No. Once we do the expansion, that's basically it. I don't know if you've noticed this in Blizzard's history, but basically any second expansion was often done by another studio. I don't think that's a tradition that we carried on. And it's not because we couldn't do another expansion. It's just because people were so burned out at that point. Because you have to understand that Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos basically went straight into the Frozen Throne. There was like a month off where people who were basically dead from over a year of crunch had lost their minds. And so you needed some time off to get over that. But then you just came back and you started working on the Frozen Throne. I'll say this for the expansion, though. Doing a game and then doing an expansion for it is always a good idea, because once you finish the game, you sort of have a complete set of tools and you have a good idea of how to use them, and everyone on the team is experienced with it. So the expansion, it moves so much faster.
Yeah,
so much faster, because
sense.
Almost all the decisions are kind of already made. And when it comes to the story and stuff, people are moving very quickly on it because they've already got an idea in their head of what else they...
See, aside from the burnout, that's kind of interesting that more expansions aren't done naturally, because what he's essentially saying is you can pump out an expansion way quicker than you can the original product. So when you only really make one expansion, you're almost missing out on a trick. Do you know what I mean? To essentially create another product to monetize to the public with essentially effective, quick work.
Wanted to do and all the missed opportunities from the previous ones. I wish more studios would
I'm wearing
go with
his
that model
shirt
of development where they create the big game, the
and his
new
glasses,
release,
yeah.
and then they do an expansion for it where they refine all the edges, and now that they know all the tools, they do like the really cool stuff they wanted to do. It wasn't exactly like that for Warcraft 3 because there was time constraints and things like that, but that's pretty much how it went. Were there any plans or ideas for another Warcraft 3 campaign after founding of Durotar? No. I'm just going to go with a simple no on that one. These two questions should have been. All right, that's fine. Do you...
So what I would say to that, that would have been cool. But, you got to remember, I mean, now we don't actually have custom campaigns thanks to Reforged. But you kind of do, but you have to get like individual levels, load them up from the map editor, and then place them that way. But we don't actually have official custom campaigns. Whereas, like people create tons of custom campaigns. I've played for a ton as well. So even if the developers themselves didn't like create extra content from that perspective, we got it from the community. So you just like endless like campaign material for Warcraft 3.
For normal campaign style or the founding of Durotar WoW version 0.5 campaign style that you're working on. Okay, I understand. So the founding of Durotar has a unique backstory to it, which is that there was not going to be an orc campaign for the Frozen Throne. It was just going to be removed for time constraints, and so that we could have a relatively stable, easy, and breezy, campaign an amount of time to get the game out. Now that said, it was Tim Campbell's idea to do the founding of Durotar in that Diablo style, and he pretty much did most of that himself in terms of like it was his concept and he pushed for it and made it happen. I know he got help from a bunch of designers on that, including myself. But if it were not for Tim Campbell, that campaign would not exist.
Chad.
In terms of doing another version of it or like expanding on it, no, that never came up because it was quite a chunk to chew for the development cycle of the Frozen Throne.
That's awesome, man. Thanks, Tim, for that. So yeah, Founder of Durotar is beloved by like tons of people. I don't think there's really anyone that didn't like playing for it. It's one hell of a cinematic, story-based RPG adventure. In an RTS, it's pretty cool, pretty damn cool. It's got loads of dungeons.
In terms
and
of
stuff
whether
as well,
or not I prefer that campaign style, yeah, I do actually enjoy that sort of campaign style a little bit better because it gives you that sense of continuity and it gives you a larger area within which to tell different stories and have a combined sort of story. So I do prefer them, but they are quite painful to create. what are some examples of story elements and missions that were scrapped entirely? So this one I already had notes for because I had to think about this one for a little bit. So a lot of people already sort of know about this, but Jaina was actually supposed to die in one of the early human missions as a motivation for Arthas. And that was obviously scrapped, both because you didn't really get to know Jaina well enough and because it's sort of a, the fridge trope from comics. It was sort of a little bit tired. This is actually one of those things that's quite interesting.
Yeah, the fridge trope. Yeah, that's where they basically use a female death to progress the male's story.
From how Blizzard operated, at least back then, was that the campaign designers would read through the scripts and then they would give feedback, and our feedback was, this doesn't make a lot of sense because we just met her and now she's gone. So it doesn't work as a motivation for Arthas, and he's already got plenty of motivation. He's trying to save his kingdom.
So Jaina's early death, Illidan being a satyr. He kind of was a satyr. There's that Samwise Didier art of Illidan, and he, like, the top part of him is all normal, but he's got hooves. So that was interesting. I noticed that, and I wasn't sure if that was an issue or, like, just a style. Obviously, he's like part demon because he's, metamorphosis, so maybe that was part of the inspiration, but I think that was one of the early artworks of him potentially being, like, more satyr-like.
So it wasn't needed, and why kill a cool character and so on. And yeah, Jaina has gone on to be an important character in
Satyrs are night elves
corrupted. Another one is Illidan was initially a satyr. When we first read the script, he was a satyr, and he sort of spoke like a satyr from Shakespeare. Like he had that sort of kind of prose. If you're not familiar with Shakespeare, you'll get the idea. Not that it was completely like Shakespeare, but it was definitely prose. And we all were not feeling it. So
yeah. I'm not sure that would have worked. He wouldn't be as badass if he was like that.
He became the Demon Hunter, and it worked a lot better, obviously. And Illidan, I think, is one of the most interesting characters from the series as well. And the final mission where you slow down Archimonde's ascent to the World Tree was the big one that got scrapped. So there was some people know about this, but there was another mission in Reign of Chaos at the end that would have been the precursor to the cinematic, where all the Night Elf sperm attacks him and gets into his pores or whatever they do. There was going to be a mission where he's actually slowly walking up this hill and you're like doing things to slow him down, but it just didn't work. It just wasn't fun, and it felt very anticlimactic after the huge battle in the previous movie.
Right. So I think, as I'm interpreting that, I assume it would have been like you finished the last level and then it loads up another level where it is basically just Archimonde going up a hill and you're trying to stop him. So yeah, that would have been, I would have played it. I probably wouldn't have complained because I wouldn't have thought too much of it, but I think, just ending it where they did was fine.
So it was scrapped pretty late in the game, pretty close to Gold Master. Was Jaina supposed to die in Call to the Damned? Yes, I just explained that. So I sort of answered two questions at once. I think that's why I paired them together like that. Sort of how I picked these, is that the ones that were close enough I would put together. What was involved in the original final mission of defending the World Tree? So as I stated earlier, it was basically
goblin landmines,
like scaled up quite large and moving up a hill towards the tree, and we had the branches of Yggdrasil kind of strewn throughout the mission. We had art for that, and you would build defenses, basically. So you'd build towers and things like that, and he would have to take time to destroy them. But really, there were too many ways to cheese it, and it just wasn't that interesting. Like, it was like a slow-moving thing that you couldn't stop. You literally couldn't stop it because the whole point is that he gets to the World Tree. So it was a mission you were going to lose, and then you're just sort of fighting a timer. And I've had a huge rant about timered missions like that, where there's a point of no return where you realize that you failed and there's nothing you can do about it, no matter how much time is left on the clock. But you have to keep going anyways, or you cancel and start over, and you're never really sure where that point is, and it's just frustrating. So it was super anticlimactic compared to the previous mission. If you were to make a new campaign today, what kind of stuff would you put in there? And would you make a new race with a new tech tree in it? Which race, if so? Yeah. If we were to make a new campaign today, I would do split the elves, the dwarves, the gnomes, and various other races. And I'd have like 10 different races and build entirely new tech trees and everything for them, and new units for them. I think the thing at the time...
That's almost doable in a way. I think there's a lot of artwork at Hive Workshop there where people have probably created a lot of models for all of these separate races. So that part's kind of done, I think, even with animations.
It's tough to balance an RTS in when it comes to having 4 different races, it's very difficult to
Everyone
keep
would like the
something like that
dwarfs.
balanced.
The
And
dwarfs
that
would be
was
the best
where
one.
the majority of time was spent, was balancing those units. And I don't think it ever actually. I don't even know if to this day it's balanced or if it's just good enough that people accept it. So with that in mind, the most fun is creating those units, coming up with the designs for what would the elves do if they were on their own, or what would the dwarves be like if they're on their own. So similar to
Shush,
how we
kick
did something
fit.
with the blood elves, with like we had obvious limitations, but it would be fun to revisit that, and with art support and design support and code support, create entirely different tech trees and everything, and sort of delve into what would the dwarves be like. And so
Awesome is what they'd be like.
In terms of a new campaign, I would like to do some sort of prequel Warcraft 3 story, because we saw how things were when a huge demonic threat was coming down, and that's sort of something you need to drive a story like that. But much like the founding of Durator campaign, I'd like to see a more sprawling, slower paced kind of story that delves into each of the races and sort of goes into their backstories and histories, and how why they were warring and what brought them together. I mean, initially it was the orc threat, but I think that story hasn't been told for Warcraft in the right way, but maybe that's just me. Do you see any missed opportunities in Warcraft 3 or any of its missions? Yeah, I see nothing but missed opportunities. That's the problem when you're making these things, is after the fact, you think of all the stuff that you would have put in if you had had the time. Now,
Coulda,
that being
shoulda,
said,
woulda.
there's nothing in particular that I would change about Warcraft 3 now. It's more that there's like a degree of polish that I think we could have even gone a step further. That said, I wish that we had done more interesting side missions and more branching paths, because that was the thing that for me would have been the most interesting, is to have a branching storyline where you get multiple different types of endings depending on what choices you made. And
That's so hard to do, though.
Games means I destroy this guy and I don't destroy that guy, and that has consequences down the road, and we never
On the
did.
next level. The thing that makes that even harder is, like you said, there was 9 people working on the campaign, so there's people doing separate levels. So you'd have to take into account what the other guy doing in the map before you, where the character that you were going to put in your map actually gets killed by the player in that version. Do you see what I mean? So that would be complicated. I could see that being really hard to do.
Anything with it, because we were so afraid of the fallout of that, is that you now have all these missions with all these different things that you have to keep track of. But I think we should have just bit the bullet and did it. I mean, if Mass Effect can track your story choices, certainly we could too. Granted, it has different impacts in an RTS, and we have to be careful that some missions don't become unplayable, or it still has to follow the main storyline. But we could have done that, and I think we just got lazy or scared. So I wish we'd done a branching storyline, and then there would be the base canon, and then there would be the alternative endings, and I think that would have been really, really cool. Of course, it would require more cinematics, but because of how long it takes to make the cinematics for Warcraft 3, that would not have been possible to have different cinematics for each one. But maybe we could have done animatics. Missed opportunities. What was the thinking behind the expansion human campaign being focused solely on the Blood Elves and their technology tree?
Oh, that's so good, that one.
And let's combine it with the next one.
That's one of my favorite campaigns.
Why were there so many custom unit races in the Curse of the Blood Elves? It's because we wanted to have another race and show another tech tree.
KOFest campaign, so damn good.
To do that. I believe it's Tim who primarily wanted to do that. And a little bit of back lore, I guess. I wrote the lines of dialogue for the Elven Blood Elf engineer.
No, not like that. Let me do it. I'll have it up in no time. 2 + 3 × 2. What do you want?
So, one of the earliest.
Oh, Jazilla, thank you very much there for the sub. Have some more minutes. Yes, thank you indeed.
Have some more minutes, winking face.
Yeah. Fun tip. Azavan could do a really good impression of the high elf engineer.
Bits of writing that actually resulted in voiced dialogue.
Engineer,
so
whatever you want to call it.
About that. And the thinking was that players would be bored with the normal tech trees. So we just wanted to give them a new tech tree. Here's try this out. Now, granted, it wasn't amazing, but it was different, and that was sort of the main thing that we wanted to focus on in the campaign missions. It's we're not teaching the game. This is we're doing this for story purposes, and so we can do whatever we want because it's cool.
That's true.
Hopefully people liked it, and well, I mean, Warcraft 3 and the Frozen Throne are all-time top games, I think. So Characters like Uther, Kel'Thuzad in his necromancer form, and Tichondrius have voice lines but are never playable in the campaign. Were they intended to be playable? What other characters were taken out? It was intended that you could play with them if you wanted to. And the thing is, we knew we were releasing the map editor. So any units that we created specifically for the game, for the campaign, we made sure to have all the voice sounds that would be necessary.
What about the soldier dude, whose only line whenever he attacks is "Foul beast, foul beast"? They could have at least given that guy 2 lines, but I think he's the only one who has like 1 voice line, basically, practically, other than like a zombie character.
Player took them over or put them in a map and started to play with them. Otherwise, you would put Tichondrius in a map and you'd like start clicking around and you wouldn't have anything to say. And you'd be like, oh, why is this character silent? It'd feel broken. So that we did it for the players who wanted to play with it. That's
there you go. See, they went the extra mile.
I think we used.
They wouldn't do that now.
I don't remember any characters being removed. Why does Tichondrius have a sheet on digging up the dead? Let's go look. Let's look at that. So
yeah,
I thought
think
it
he
would be
does.
fun to
Digging up the dead. Isn't that where he's on the hill or something, and there's a sheep next to him? I think it might be.
And see these things for ourselves. I don't remember everything I did. Let's be real. It's been a long time.
Foul Beast, the campaign.
As I recall, where is his sheep? You say he has a sheep. Where is Tichondrius' sheep? Oh, you are correct.
Oh.
He doesn't drop anything. He's neutral. Okay. I know who did this. During development,
I didn't know about that.
Maps can pass through several campaign designers' hands. One of those campaign designers is David Hale, and I believe he's the one who put the sheep in here. I remember him mentioning something about, I gave him a sheep, and I didn't know what he meant. Now I do. So Tichondrius has a sheep because Dave Hale thought it would be funny if Tichondrius had a sheep. He also named some of the characters. Let's see if we can...
That's a real Easter egg, that is. You'd have to be looking hard in the editor to find that.
Is there one that brings up all the units? Aha. Here we go. Custom. So here you can see all the custom named units. Balcor, Dirk, Garak, Hebon, Joseph, Kenshin, and Leanna. Kenshin's a reference to Rurouni Kenshin, and I was a big fan of that anime at the time, so I would slip in references to it periodically. It's also in my StarCraft Trigger Map of the Month program map, Deception, as one of the terminals you can find. Lots of doggos. This doggo has triggers. A unit enters near Kel'Thuzad. Entering unit equal to Arthas is false.
That's a lot of triggers for a dog.
When Arthas gets in near him. Why is there a dog in this one? Where's the dog? So all of this, like removing all the buffs and stuff, is just to not have those buffs in the cinematic. So you get your Kel'Thuzad.
Huh.
I'm not sure why the dog is referenced in here. That's quite strange. Oh, I know. Okay, so this is the Kel'Thuzad cinematic. So this is actually over here. There's a dog here. And I guess he has the dog howl or something. Maybe it's for sound. See, there's so many things that went into these maps. There's no way to...
You got to get into his head.
There's no way to know. One thing that we don't have is a find option, which would have been great. Because if I could hit Control F right now and find the dog, that would be...
I think they do in the latest, at least Reforged,
There
put
it
in
is.
like a find
Arthas'
option
head to
for
face dog. Oh my god,
units
that's right.
and stuff, which was very
If
helpful.
you wanted Arthas to look at something, at that point in development,
Yeah.
you would have to use a unit and face something. And
Yes.
so
This bit I know.
I guess I used the dog. Oh, the memories. Because you have to remember that during Reign of Chaos, the map editor was in development at the same time. So sometimes we didn't have things like turning the head.
90
And
degrees
so
or
I
whatever.
used a shortcut or a cheat. And I put this dog who's trapped here in this corner.
That makes
and
sense.
Arthas faces the dog
Yeah,
during the cinematic.
yeah, that's what you would do.
For the purposes of the cinematic to make it more dramatic. That's a lot of work for just a head turn. But back then it was important to us, these sort of small details. So, it's funny what you can remember just looking at the map editor. The answer is because Dave Hale thought it was funny. But the
There you
sheet doesn't
go.
have any triggers or anything, so there's no real reason for it.
What happened if you killed the dog? I assume you can't kill the dog from that angle unless you chop the trees at the top that led towards the dog. You can always try it out if you want, if you got a range unit that can maybe reach it. I don't know if a melee unit can do it because the doodads might block you from accessing it. I assume if the dog is dead, Arthas just simply won't look over to the left because there's no dog to look over to.
Just looking at
All
the
right.
map editor. The answer is because Dave Hale thought it was.
So let's move on to part 2 then, since we're in this. Damn! I have to change the volume again.
Question 14. Why was Curse of the Blood Elf such a short campaign? Was more planned for it? No. So it was short because... so keep in mind that Reign of Chaos was a game that was 5 years in development. And I'd say a good year and a half of that, if not 2 years, was the campaign being
I don't
made.
think it was that short.
From the storyline to the tools, the editor...
I think the levels are
to
just
the
really
actual
bloody good.
campaign itself. So... that took 2 years. We had a good understanding of the tools. But now keep in mind, Reign of Chaos finishes and releases. Everyone's brain is fried. We all go on vacation for like at least a month. The Frozen Throne production starts immediately upon your return. People are still like chilling from their vacation. Things are moving slowly. Basically, we were like, we have 1 year to do the expansion. That was always sort of the, this is what's going to happen. But really, it was more like 9 months
500.
because people just were, it took a while to get back into the groove. So at that point, what we decided as a team was that if we weren't feeling it, we would just cut it. And I think a large part of that was that Tim wanted to spend more time on the Durotar campaign for the orcs, which we were not going to have an orc mission at all. So we have to move that time around somewhere, right? So if we're doing an orc mission, if we're doing an orc campaign when we weren't going to do one, then let's take a little bit from the Blood Elf campaign, which it had a lot of cool missions and stuff, but the story was kind of told pretty quick. It didn't need as many missions maybe as others would. I'm gonna put it because we wanted orc stuff. I think that works.
I could whack it up to
but Tim,
1.25 again, but we'll keep it where it is for now.
What's the story behind the founding of Durotar? Why was it made into an RPG-style campaign? Who was behind its creation? And did you have a part in its design and creation? Tim Campbell, 100%. And if you don't know who Tim Campbell is, I will show you. Frost Giant Studios. Tim Campbell is one of the co-founders of Frost Giant Studios, and he was largely responsible for many of the cool things that you saw in the founding of Durotar. In fact, without him, that campaign mission, the orcs having a campaign at all, never would have happened.
Yeah.
So if you'd all do me a favor and go to frostgiant.com and subscribe, I'm sure he'd appreciate it, and I'd appreciate it too.
Subscribe.
And then if you want to see who Tim Campbell is, here he is. Tim Campbell, game director and president, former game director of Wasteland 3, lead campaign.
Let's have a little look then, shall we? Like and subscribe. Oh, they're friends, aren't they? So, I see. I'll hide that away from you guys. Filthy chat. Thank you. You have successfully registered. Okay.
See, I worked with him on Wasteland 3 too, so we go back a ways. But yeah, campaign designer of Warcraft 3: The Frozen Throne. There you go. Now you know. Did you actually use the world editor to make the missions? How was it different as a program back then? Yes, 100%. We used the world editor to make all the campaign missions with very little deviation from what you guys got at the end, except that our tools were incomplete. So at the time of making Reign of Chaos, there were things that we just didn't have. And we sort of had to make hacks to work around it, or just figure it out, or just skip that content and do something else.
He didn't mention when they were working on this, because I'd be interested to know that, because Warcraft 3 came out, what was it, 2001, wasn't it? Like July 2001, I think. So were they working on it like 1999 or something like that? Or 1998? You know, that kind of thing. Like, how long ago? When did they really first start? Like, when did that map editor first come into being?
So that it could be quite frustrating when we're making a campaign. But ultimately, we were making the campaign editor, the map editor, for release. And we wanted the campaign editor that we made the campaign with to be the thing that people got and could use. The only thing I'm disappointed in is that we locked all the campaign maps, because I think there was no reason to do that other than size constraints, because it had to fit on a disk, so we had compression, so maybe that was the reason. But it would have been nice if after the fact we had released them. And I think now you can just go and open them.
Original WoW used the
But
Warcraft
in
3
my
engine.
case, I had
Yes.
to rely on another
Yes.
tool to do
Without Warcraft 3, there
but
would be no World of
the
Warcraft.
trigger editor, the triggers and all that are exactly the same thing that you guys have. We didn't do anything different except on 2 missions. There are cases where programmers actually had to go in, and because we wanted to do something so complicated that the trigger editor couldn't handle it, or it would choke the CPU or GPU, it would cause problems. So in those cases, they would, in those 2 cases that I remember, they would edit it in direct code. And that was Mike Morheim edited Calling of Strathholm. There's a couple triggers there that he turned into actual code. And I believe Michael Heiberg edited one of his missions that had a moving wagon. I can't remember which one that was. Oh yeah, that's the Culling. Hello, Culling, my old friend. Oh, the memories. It's been so long. Oh, right. I wanted to show you where the triggers have been edited. Oh, man. Oh, the pain. Oh, the waterfalls. So important. And it's
Big level.
It's gotta be. Yeah. Look at that. So you can see here that this is code. Those aren't triggers. These are triggers. This is code. So when Mike Morheim was fixing my map, see, I made my map so complicated that the president of the company had to come and go back to coding to fix it.
Damn, that's sick, man. That's crazy, isn't it? Mike Morheim comes in and like codes your map.
Anyways, if you open up the Culling of Strathholm, you can see where actual code was used to make things work. I literally can't read this. I never understood what he did. But, you know, all the triggers stuff, that was my stuff. And then when he was fixing it, he was like, let's just do it in code. And if you can do that, great. What you got at release was better than what we had when we were making the campaign. Think about that. Did you make the cutscenes in the missions, or was that a different set of developers? Yes, I did. I did a lot of them. So let's open cinematics. So one thing with the cinematics was that about halfway through development, Mike Heiberg came up with like a template for cinematics that helped a lot, made it easier, because the main thing was like...
The only thing I would say here, you might mention it in a moment, but it's got to be like it's one thing to create the map and what the player's going to do, but the cutscenes might be quite tricky to make unless he knows what the voice lines are going to be and they've already been recorded. For example, when Arthas is like, I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth and all that kind of stuff. Well, for the cutscene, he's got to make Arthas, you know, push forward and all of this kind of stuff, like act a certain way. So they must have that stuff done before they're creating the maps, or I guess they got the script. He was mentioning, Chris Metzen said they had a script, so there's that. They must follow the script then.
Let me find the most famous cinematic of all time.
But then that's tricky because having a script is one thing, but a voice actor might say a certain line with 2 seconds. Or he might take 5 seconds to say the line. And if you're doing... Because I've done a little bit of this. I'm really bad at the Warcraft 3 editor. But generally speaking, I have done a little bit. I've dabbled. And as you can see, like, look here, you've got wait point 50 seconds. Wait point 10 seconds. So you kind of need to know exactly how long the voice line is going to be and that kind of stuff for that to all flow. Do you see what I mean?
To make our cinematic skippable, we had to account for all the things that could happen during the cinematic that we wanted to maintain. So every cinematic has a cancel set of triggers that has to be there. This is me creating groups of units for the cinematic so that they all move together and do things. If you watched my live stream a little while
Sound.
back, you'll see where I edited this already. So this is actually slightly different than the original culling, but it's just mostly to improve little elements of it because I wanted to fix some of the camera angles. But yeah, I would go in, I would place cameras, and then one of the best tricks to do is you just want that camera to be constantly moving to give that feeling of motion throughout. And so otherwise it's just two stagnant characters talking at each other. And you can do little head movements and slight animations and stuff, but that feeling of movement from the camera panning around and moving from position to position, to
especially in 3D,
ambiance,
make the use of it.
It's really important and something that unfortunately was missing in Reforged. But yeah, I did a lot of cinematics, and I was really into these. I think I fancied myself a director at some point in my life. And what was so fun about the cinematic stuff was that you were basically making a movie, and at the time that kind of blew my mind.
Yeah, Warcraft 3 gave people loads of opportunities to do stuff like that.
Yeah, the script was already done, so I wasn't doing anything with that. But you'll see that I had a few Easter eggs where I took some creative license and took some voice lines that weren't necessarily supposed to be intended for the purposes that I used them for. Oh, later in development, the artists actually did come in and do some of the cinematics. And they also gave me a book on cinematography where I learned about how you're not supposed to flip the camera more than 180 degrees, which I did in the culling of Stratham, the opening cinematic. How is working on Frozen Throne levels different from working on Random Chaos ones? It was a lot faster paced, I'll say that. But also, we knew the tools at this point. So we just sort of knew what we were doing. And things came together a lot quicker. So we would have playable missions.
I feel like the Frozen Throne levels were a lot more RPG style, story-based,
and that's probably why
adventure,
Tim invested so much
like
time
little
into
dungeons
the
and stuff.
Campaign mission and making it that different styles, because
which is really good.
He realized, like, oh, we can do all these things, so let's show what we can do. It was faster paced, but easier overall. And that just comes from knowledge. The more you know the tools, the easier it is to use them. Can you please show us where exactly the secret units locations are on the screen during Thrall's Vision cinematic? It is said that there's a Hydralisk somewhere in there and other secret units, but I personally cannot spot them.
Well, the Hydralisk's at the top.
Thrall's Vision cinematic.
Although...
Am I going to get copyright strike for this? I don't remember there being Hydralisk in here, but it sounds like something they would...
What, in the actual cinematic?
Oh, it's when they come rolling over the hill, isn't it?
This is going to be loud, by the way. I can't do much about that.
By conflict.
Conflict. There we go. It's coming. Crow Eye. You could have anything in the back.
I was walking to town earlier today, and there was like a grass verge on the left, there's a road on the right, and there's the pathway going around to where I'm walking. And there was two crows who were like nibbling at the grass. And I tried to move further to the right of the path, knowing that they're going to get, they're going to probably fly off or something. As in to say, you don't have to fly off. I'm not going to do anything. But they flew off anyway, and they were like, ah, ah. They proper sounded pissed off, and I'm thinking, all right, mate, it's not my fault. I can only go so far here. You don't have to fly off. I'm not going to do anything to you. But they're making a big song and dance of it.
Around there, you would...
As if I just ruined their day or something. They had to fly off and then come back after I've gone.
Yeah, there's no way we find this. I do recall there being Hydralisk in the background of one of these scenes.
I didn't know there was a Hydralisk in here. There is.
Department would have to answer. But as I recall, I think it's here. But how would you ever even spot it at this resolution?
You could just claim one of them as a Hydralisk. Hang on a second, isn't that Hydralisk?
It just looks like a rock. But how would you ever...
If I was to say anything like a Hydralisk, it's like that kind of orangey colour. There's like an orangey colour here. Like a kind of snake Z. It's kind of small though. But that looks more orangey. I wouldn't
It's
necessarily
possible.
say that was a
It might be
Hydralisk,
that,
but
actually.
if there was,
It
then
just looks
maybe
like a
that would be
rock.
it.
No, I can't. I'm gonna have to. Someone else is gonna have to answer that one. Why is the Scourge of Lordaeron the only campaign to feature epilogue text on the last level? So the reason for that is that it was confusing. The confusion came from.
What's this question? Sorry. Why is the Scourge of Lordaeron the only campaign to feature epilogue text on the last level? Trying to remember what that looks like. I guess he'll explain it.
It was confusing. The confusion came from people were like, "Hey, I just got Frostmourne, and now I'm ready to come home and save my town." And then Arthas murders his dad. Spoilers. So it felt. Some people felt that there was a little bit more explanation needed, and because
that
it was
bit.
sort of the epic of Arthas, or at least his human life, it needed a little bit more of a transition than it got, because it wasn't clear necessarily from the cinematic what was going on in his, or what had happened to him. Because you just got the sword, and yeah, you did some crazy stuff all along the way, but it needed a little bit more than that. So after taking his vengeance upon Mal'Ganis, Prince Arthas wandered off into the frozen wastelands of Northrend. Tormented by Frostmourne's maddening voice, Arthas lost the last vestiges of his sanity. Kind of a cop-out, in my opinion. Now, driven by the sword's dark will, Arthas plans to return home to Lordaeron and claim his just reward.
I mean, we can always be thankful to Chris Metzen for, like, Warcraft 3 and all that. But they sure did get a little bit carried away with the whole corruption thing. It's unfortunate to take that sort of storyline beat where a character gets, in quotation marks, corrupted, because it essentially takes away their actions and the consequences of their actions. Really, I think you should never have that. You can just have arsehole characters. Do you know what I mean? Like characters that are just dicks. They don't have to be corrupted. They're just dicks. Arthas was a bit of a dick, let's face it. Not necessarily corrupted. He was just a bit of a dick. He was headstrong, and he just got too carried away in his own goal, and then lost, sense of the actual real objective.
So, yeah, basically it was that the transition between the end of the mission without the epilogue text and the cinematic was a little too harsh. So we came up with this, or someone did.
I don't know why people
And
go
it was
down that
implemented in
corrupted
the
route,
map
because
editor.
it
So you
builds
can do your own
character.
epilogue text.
If you have it so the
By
character
demons
isn't
being driven,
corrupted, they're just a
there's an
twat.
unused troll witch
That builds
doctor
character.
named Janza. Do you remember what his original purpose was? Well, no. So let's go look. Man, if you had any idea how slow these things loaded back in the day, I would never be able to do this on the machine.
Go off, have a coffee.
Janza. He has no triggers associated with him. He's got a different tint, and he's slightly bigger. He has sleep, healing ward, and stasis trap. Looks like he has increased regeneration and much higher max mana. This isn't my map. Is it? Is it? Did I do this one? I can't remember anymore. Long story short, I have no idea. I don't know why I picked this.
That's where they
section.
have to save
I think
Grom,
I
that
thought
map,
I knew
I
who
think.
it was, and that I would find it when I went in the editor. And I was wrong.
Cairn, Thrall,
Did you have
and
any
Gina.
voice lines in the game? I don't know for sure, but I did do a couple readings, but I don't think they were used. There's the footman who gets killed, but it's like a warning that her dad is there. And I think I did a reading of that line. It's like, Mistress Gina, your father would be... something along those lines.
Mistress Gina, we found you at last. The Admiral will be overjoyed.
And I did try to do a reading for like the ogres and stuff. This way, no that way, that kind of stuff. But I don't think they used anything that I did. I was more on the writing side of things. So all the Blood Elf Engineer lines are mine. So that's a claim to fame. Is it an offense to the original developers of Warcraft 3 if fans rewrite the game engine into an open source version that can run the maps and models? No, totally do that. Do whatever you want, man. In my opinion, it should all be open source and free. I am not offended, but it would be illegal. Beware the eye of Activision. It's just the sad truth is that we don't do open source stuff anymore. I mean, some games do, but Blizzard definitely not. All that stuff's proprietary, and if you try to do that kind of stuff, I guess you could reverse engineer it.
I honestly feel like if Blizzard haven't done anything for like Warcraft 3 Reforged, I mean, we got the 2-year anniversary coming up from Reforged soon, and you know, like 2 to 3 years, if they still haven't done anything at that point, I don't even know why they would like take offense to people going open source with it. They should just be like, yeah, you know, we have literally just completely given up on this game. Just go have at it at this point. That's super petty to sort of like not actually finish the game properly and then stop anyone from who actually wants to finish the game from finishing it.
Yeah, there was a game company in Korea that reverse engineered StarCraft, I want to say, and made their own game. Kingdom Under Fire? Something like that. And then Blizzard sued them because they had like clearly cut copy-pasted code. There was stuff in there that was like straight up one-to-one. Like it wasn't reverse engineered at that point. And then I think what they ended up doing is they changed their game a little bit so that it didn't use the direct code. The interlude Unfinished Business, after balancing the scales, takes place somewhere in Ashenvale, but it uses...
What did he say that game was?
That was like straight up cut copy. Blizzard sued them. Something like that. Game. Kingdom Under Fire? Something like that.
Kingdoms Under Fire. Let's quickly look that up. I know there was a mobile game that I saw which used Warcraft 3 units and stuff like that, but it's definitely not done by Blizzard or anything like that. But it was blatantly like just Warcraft 3 units and all of that. Let's just have a quick look. I'll just put it on mute in case there's any copyrighted pasta stuff. Just want to have a quick little look. Kind of looks like a blend of Heroes of Might and Magic and Warhammer or something like that. Total Warhammer. But it's got that sort of similar-ish... Oh, hang on a second. Was that an archer? Almost looked like a... I thought it was a Night Elf archer's face there for a second. Alright, there you go.
And then Blizzard sued them because they had like clearly cut copy-pasted code. There was stuff in there that was like straight up one-to-one. Like it wasn't reverse engineered at that point. And then I think what they ended up doing is they changed their game a little bit so that it didn't use the direct code. The interlude Unfinished Business, after balancing the scales, takes place somewhere in Ashenvale, but it uses Lordaeron Summer tile set. Is this an oversight? Typically, no. This is an aesthetic choice. And in the case of the Frozen Throne, I believe the tile set wasn't done at the time the interlude was being made. And then it just didn't get switched or something.
I've never noticed that.
Be... Yeah, we didn't have the Ashenvale tile set until pretty late for some reason. So I'm actually not 100% sure on this one. So it was probably a combination of factors. I think it was that the tile set wasn't finished at the time that the interlude was being made, and 2, that there were some aesthetic choices made in it that made it impossible to transition it to the Ashenvale tile set later. So in a situation where, like, I guess I could scrap the whole map and start over, we were like, yeah, because it's a 9-month, really, development cycle. Yeah, it's 1 year, but really it's 9 months. When Illidan becomes complete in A Destiny of Flame and Sorrow, why is his ultimate ability mass teleport? Probably for a cinematic effect. But let's open A Destiny of Flame and Sorrow and see.
I have to go now. My home planet needs me. Mass teleport cell.
What we want is Illidan. Nope, that's the same.
Illidan is out there somewhere.
We'll talk about that another day. Unit editor. Where's the object editor? Yes.
Are you sure about this?
Illidan Evil.
Just got debated.
Illidan Demon Form.
I never remember having
Mass
mass
teleport.
teleport.
Yeah, that's been edited. Fascinating. I believe he cast Mass Teleport in a cinematic, and that's why I think it's done.
Ah,
but
I
let
see.
me
So it's
make
just another version of him. Just for the
why would
cinematic
the object
purposes.
editor then? That would be the trigger. Satyr hates you. God. Egg sacks. Oh, alright, I'm being distracted. Looking for cast. You know what it was? Now that I'm thinking about it. Okay. So sometimes we get ideas for if we want to do something. And I think an early idea was that Illidan would transform into demon form and then he would mass teleport away. So the reason that this unit exists is because that idea started and then it didn't come to fruition, or we did something else. In the cinematic, I believe he
just
away, but I'd have to
He just destroys the
assuming he
trees
doesn't
and
skip
walks
it, he's
away.
Korean. They tend to skip cinematics. This is awesome.
But-
It's in Korean.
Just trashes the trees. Right in front of Malfurion.
일단 어디서 그런 짓을?
That's pretty,
언데드의 우두머리를 처치했어. 시간이 지나면
This definitely seems like it might be one of my cinematics,
영혼을 팔아넘긴
except that the
대가가
cameras aren't
아니냐.
continuing to move. Yeah, maybe it's
넌
not.
이제 내 동생이 아니다. 이곳에서
So I had a tendency to always have my camera be moving in my cinematics, so
파괴들이지 마라.
I would do it over conjoined lines and durations and stuff. So
That's a
it would
good
always
angle.
be slowly moving. Does he mass
look at this,
teleport?
he's going to trash the
No, he
trees.
just busts
Oh, he
through the
ju-
trees.
I thought he actually, like,
So the reason
used
that
a
he
shot,
had mass teleport
shot the
is
trees
because
down,
we were thinking he would mass
and then
teleport
walked
away
through
at the end. And he just didn't do it. Instead, we had him bust through the trees because that's a little bit cooler. And that's the answer. And that's it. I've answered, I think, 23 questions.
There you go.
Of the 25 that I picked, I handpicked these, so I feel a little bit dumb about that. But either way, I hope that these answers were satisfactory and that it gave you some sense of closure. If you like and subscribe and you vote this
Like,
up and
subscribe.
you share it around, maybe we can get the attention of some of the other people that I want to talk to, and for them to know that there's a platform for certain things that they're doing, I think would be a big benefit to convincing them that this would be a good idea to do a 20 years after the fact, ask me anything kind of situation. And we've already got the questions all set up for them, so it should be pretty. I think the convincing is not that difficult, but I will make an attempt at that very soon. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will be looking at the next set of questions to answer up on Abelhawk's channel soon.
There you go. That's good stuff. That's actually really fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. Like I say, go over. I'll provide all the links in my video. Check out Abelhawk's channel, who actually sort of like came up with the idea to sort of coincide with Dave and then answer those questions from the community. So like, subscribe, and see if we can get some more.